Hey, what is going on, guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some new strong and weak champions for patch 7.9. So this patch is the mid-season patch. It's the biggest patch of the season, or at least I think it's the biggest patch of the season. There's champions getting reworked, being Maokai, Sejuani, and Zac. There's also a bunch of item changes. There's changes to the Rift Herald, so there's a lot to cover in this video here, and there's definitely a lot of different champions that are going to get stronger and weaker for 7.9. So with that being said, let's get started. So first up here, we're going to take a look at the Rift Herald changes and see which champions this is going to affect the most. So with the new Rift Herald, basically any champion can now solo it. Some champions can solo it a lot easier than others. So for example, Yorick and Shaco are probably the two best champions that can solo it without really losing too much HP. I'll show you guys some gameplay in the background here. I was kind of testing it out on the PvE, and Yorick and Shaco can take it pretty easily. Other champions definitely do struggle a little bit more. It takes them longer to take the Rift Herald, and they also drop pretty low on HP. So for example, Graves, he can solo it with his warrior and once it does spawn, but it does drop him really low on HP and it does take him quite a long time to take it. So I think that it's going to be a really good buff if your top laner can get ahead in the early game. So a few champions I think that might get stronger in this patch are some strong early game top laners. So for example, Pantheon, I think Pantheon's going to be a really good pick in this patch. If you can like camp top for the Pantheon, or if the Pantheon can just get solo kills in the laning phase, it's going to be very easy for him to grab that Rift Herald with his jungler and just end up snowballing the game out of control. So for 7.9, I think the top lane is going to be a very important lane because I think that whichever top laner ends up winning, they're going to end up getting the Rift Herald. So for example, if your jungler comes to gank top, you kill the enemy top laner, you can easily take that Rift Herald. It's pretty easy to take now, especially with two members. It doesn't take you that long, and it doesn't have that much HP, and it doesn't do a whole lot of damage anymore. So you're going to take that. If you do get a snowball going, you're going to get at least like a few towers off of the Rift Herald buff. So I think that if you're a jungler in this next patch here, and if you're a top lane main, then I would focus on playing some strong early game champions because I think those are going to have the most influence in 7.9. So overall, for top laners that will get stronger in this next patch here, I already mentioned Pantheon, and actually Pantheon has the highest win rate for any top laner in 7.8. So I think that in this next patch, he might become like really strong and just maybe a little bit overpowered, but we'll have to wait and see. Other top laners that could get stronger now are like Talon, Darius, any of these like strong early game top laners that can get a lead and get a snowball going in the laning phase. Now for jungle champions that will get better in this next patch, I'm thinking champions like Elise, Nidalee, Lee Sin, these strong early game junglers that can gank a lot in the early game, that have good damage output in the early game, and that can get their top laner ahead. So I would probably say that junglers that don't pressure a lot early game, like Master Yi for example, I feel like he's going to get a little bit weaker because if the enemy jungler can end up getting a snowball top lane and you're just farming the jungle as Master Yi, then if the enemy team ends up getting that Rift Herald buff, you're going to be pretty far behind, and your top laner is also going to be pretty far behind. So I would stay away from the more farming junglers probably in 7.9. Now a few AD carry champions that will get indirectly stronger in this next patch are Sivir and Jhin. So the changes they're doing to AD carry items, or the most significant ones, is they're increasing the cost of Blade the Ruined King by 100 gold, and they're decreasing the cost of crit items by a little bit. So they're decreasing Essence Reaver from 3,600 down to 3,400, and they're also decreasing the price of Infinity Edge from 3,600 down to 3,400. So that's 400 gold off of Sivir's core build as well as Jhin's core build. So those champions are gonna get indirectly stronger come 7.9. Now there are a lot of different item changes for this next patch. I'm obviously not gonna go over all of them because I feel like that's kind of a waste of time, and there's probably other YouTubers that have already done that. So I think the most significant changes to the items for this next patch are the fact that there's gonna now be a lot more magic resist items. So they're now adding in 2 more magic resist items, and they're changing Abyssal Scepter. So they're adding Adaptive Helm, which is going to give you 300 health, 55 MR, and some other stats as well. They're adding in Gargoyle Stone Plate, which is gonna give you 40 armor, 40 magic resist, and they're also changing Abyssal Scepter to where it's now going to give you a lot of health. So it gives you 300 health, 65 MR, and then some cooldown reduction and some health regeneration as well. So I think that with this new introduction here to these magic resist items, I feel like heavy AP comps are just like a composition where there's an AP champion that is a big threat. They're going to be really weak if there's a few tanks on the enemy team. Tank champions might get quite a bit stronger in this next patch here because, for example, if you have a composition that consists of like a Rumble top lane and a Vladimir mid lane, and you've got like a tank like Gragas in the top lane, then he's going to be able to stack that magic resist, and that Rumble and that Vladimir is going to do very, very little damage to the Gragas. He's going to be super hard to kill, even harder to kill than he is right now, which he's pretty hard to kill already in 7.8. So I think that if you do end up having a few AP champions on the same team in champion select, I would probably end up dodging if the enemy team does have a few tank champions. Now, if they don't have very many tank champions, like let's say there's like a Tryndamere top lane and there's also like a Kha'Zix in the jungle, they're probably not going to be prioritizing those magic resist tank items. So in that situation, you don't have to worry too much. But if there's a few tanks in the game and there's a few AP champions, then those tanks are almost going to be impossible to kill. Now, Banshees Veil in this next patch is no longer going to give you HP. Instead, it's going to give you ability power, and it's still going to be pretty much the same item. It's going to give you 70 AP, 45 MR, 10% CDR, and then it's going to give you that spell shield that will regenerate every 40 seconds. Now, I think Banshees Veil might be really strong on a few AP assassins. So for example, getting this on Fizz, I think would be really, really good if you're up against a AP mid lane champion, because when you're playing Fizz, you're gonna have your Zhonya's eventually. You've also got your E, which makes you invulnerable, and then if you have that spell shield, it's gonna be very, very hard to lock down Fizz. He's gonna be able to just dive in there. He's gonna be able to block your first CC ability. So for example, if you're playing against someone like Syndra that wants to try to stun you when you jump in, or Lissandra that wants to try to use her ultimate on you, then they're not gonna be able to do that if your Banshees Veil is up, and then therefore it's going to be very easy for you to assassinate those champions. And Fizz is even going to be slipperier now in 7.9, so these few AP assassin champions that are looking to dive in on the back line, then I think they're going to get quite a bit stronger now in 7.9. Now, there are quite a few changes to the support items for this upcoming patch. I don't really think these changes are going to affect too many support champions though, so I'm not going to go over those changes in the video. In my opinion, I don't think too many champions will get stronger or weaker with the changes. If you guys think there's a few champions that could get stronger though with the changes to a few of the support items, then be sure to let me know down below, because after going over the changes for a little while, I can't really think of too many champions that would get stronger or weaker. Now, as for the champion changes to Maokai, Sejuani, and Zac, I don't really want to make too many assumptions right now as to how strong these champions will be, because usually when a champion gets a rework or when they get changes, you can't really tell how strong they'll actually be until they reach live servers and until they see some play. Right now, I think that Maokai is now going to be a jungler instead of a top laner, because he's getting some changes to his E to where it's now going to deal more damage to minions. Sejuani is also getting some interesting changes to her ultimate to where it's no longer going to be a stun, it's going to be a large slow radius. I think Sejuani and Maokai, at least what the community thinks of these changes, are that they will be getting weaker for this next patch. And then for the Zac changes, I'm pretty sure people think that Zac will be stronger in this next patch, but like I said, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the changes because we'll just have to wait and see when the patch hits live to how strong these champions will actually be. And then there are also quite a few smaller changes to a lot of the other items in the game. There's changes to Guardian Angel to where it's now going to be a better item for AD champions because the item is no longer going to give you magic resist, it's going to give you attack damage instead. So this is a bit of an indirect buff to AD carry champions, and there's just many other changes that I don't really think are going to affect too many champions that much. If you guys know of a change that you think is going to make a champion just like so much stronger or quite a bit weaker in this next patch, then let me know down in the comments below. But that is going to be it for the video, guys. If you did enjoy, then please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you have yet to already, and I will see you in my next video.